The dart left the blind god's hand, and for one single heartbeat nothing happened. The gods were still laughing. The shining god still stood in the center of the ring, arms open, untouchable, the happiest he had ever been. And then the little sliver of wood, the one plant in all the world that had never sworn the oath, struck him clean through. The laughter died in every throat at once. The brightest god in all the 9 worlds swayed and fell and did not get up. He was dead, just like that. In an instant, on an ordinary afternoon, in the middle of a game, the best of them was gone. And every god standing in that ring understood, in the same frozen moment, that something far worse than grief had just arrived. This was not only a death, this was the hinge on which their entire world would now turn. The golden age of the gods ended the very second that Dart struck home. Everything after this is the long fall toward the end. For a long moment, no one moved. The gods simply stared at the body of their brightest brother, lying still on the ground where a heartbeat ago he had been laughing. Then the grief broke over them like a wave. But here is the cruel detail the Norse never let you forget. They could not even take their revenge. Not there, not then. The place where the gods held their games was sacred ground, a place of peace where no blood could be spilled. So they had to stand there, choking on their fury, unable to strike down the one who had guided that fatal throw. And the blind god who had actually thrown the dart, he had no idea what he had done. He could not see. He had only felt a friendly hand on his arm and a kind voice telling him to honor his brother. He had been used, a weapon, not a murderer. The real killer had already slipped away into the crowd wearing an innocent face. The gods wept. The whole of the heavens wept. And somewhere in the middle of that sea of tears stood one figure, dry-eyed, watching his plan come together perfectly. The morning that followed was unlike anything the 9 worlds had ever known. This was not the ordinary loss of a warrior in battle, the kind of death these people understood and even honored. This was the death of goodness itself, of the one pure and gentle thing in a hard and violent world. His wife, seeing him laid out cold and lifeless, was so overcome with grief that her own heart simply broke, and she died beside him, to be burned with him and follow him into the dark. But of all the grieving gods, one felt it deepest and worst. The old one-eyed king, because he alone fully understood what this death truly meant. The others wept for a brother they loved. But the king, with all his terrible wisdom, wept for something more. He knew the old prophecies. He knew that the death of the shining god was named in them as the first great sign that the end had begun. Every other god had lost someone precious. The king had just watched the first domino fall in the destruction of the entire world. But the gods were not ready to give him up, not yet. There might still be a way to win him back, because in this cosmos, even death was a place ruled by a queen, and a place can be visited, and a queen can be bargained with. So one brave god volunteered to make the journey no living being was meant to make. He mounted the great 8-legged horse, the fastest steed in all creation, the one born of a trick long ago, and he rode down into the dark. For 9 long nights he rode, down through the roots of the world tree, along valleys so deep and so black that he could not see his own hands. At last he came to a river that borders the land of the dead, and crossed a bridge roofed with gold, and rode on until he reached the towering gates of death itself. He drove his horse straight over that great gate in a single leap, and there, inside the cold hall, he found his brother, pale and silent, and seated in the highest place of honor, already a guest among the dead. The writer begged the Queen of the Dead to let his brother go. He told her how deeply the shining god was loved, how the whole world grieved for him, how the light had gone out of the heavens with his passing, and the Queen of the Dead listened. She was a strange and terrible ruler, half her face beautiful, half of it the dark blue of a corpse. And she was, though few said it aloud, a daughter of the very trickster who had caused all of this. She considered the plea. And then she offered a bargain. If it is true, she said, that this god is loved as much as you claim, then let everything prove it. Let every single thing in all the worlds, living and dead, weep for him. If all things, without exception, shed their tears, I will release him, and he may ride home with you. But if even one thing anywhere refuses to weep, then he belongs to me, and he stays here in the land of the dead forever. It seemed almost too easy. Who, after all, would refuse to weep for the best of the gods? So the messengers went out across all of creation, carrying the same plea to every corner of every world: weep, so that the beloved god may live again. And the world answered. Everything wept. Men and women wept in their homes. The gods wept in their golden halls. The beasts of the forest and the birds of the air wept. And then the plea reached beyond all living things. and the stones themselves began to weep. The trees wept. The metals in the deep earth wept. Fire and water, iron and gold, all of it ran with tears. You have surely seen this yourself on a cold morning when the stones and the iron are wet as if they have been crying. The old stories say that this is why it is the whole world still weeping for the God it could not save. Everything, everywhere, shed its tears for him. Every single thing in all of creation joined in the great weeping, and it seemed absolutely certain that the shining God was coming home. All that remained was to find the last few things, in the last dark corners, and the bargain would be complete. But in a dark cave, in a lonely place, the messengers found one last figure, an old giantess sitting alone in the shadows, and they asked her, as they had asked everything else, to weep for the fallen god, so that he could return to the living, and she refused. She looked at them with dry, cold eyes and said, in effect, "The shining god did nothing for me in life, let the queen of the dead keep what she holds," and she shed not a single tear. That was all it took. One creature, in one cave, at the edge of the world, dry-eyed by choice. Because of her, the bargain was broken. Because of her, the shining god could never come home. He would stay in the land of the dead until the end of all things. And of course, you already know. That old giantess in the cave was no giantess at all. It was the trickster wearing yet another face, making absolutely certain that the god he had killed could never, ever be brought back. He had murdered him once with a dart. Now he murdered him a second time with a refusal to cry, and so they burned him. They laid the shining god upon his own great ship, the largest ever built, piled high with treasures, with his dead wife beside him, and his horse and his rings. The gods gathered on the shore, the whole grieving family, and even the giants came, and the frost figures, to watch the best of them go. As the flames rose, the old king leaned down to the ear of his dead son and whispered something into it. To this day, no one knows what those words were. It is one of the great secrets of the Norse world. Then they pushed the burning ship out onto the dark water, and the light of the gods sailed away into the night. But grief, in time, turned into something colder. The gods began to understand. They saw the pattern. They realized that behind the dart and behind the dry-eyed giantess stood the same grinning face, their friend, their blood brother. The trickster had taken from them the one thing they all loved, and then made absolutely sure they could never get it back. And the patience of the gods, at long last, ran out. They hunted him down. And when they finally caught the trickster, their revenge was monstrous. They dragged him deep beneath the earth and bound him to 3 great stones, and above him they fixed a serpent, so that its venom would drip endlessly onto his face. His faithful wife stayed beside him, holding a bowl to catch the poison, but each time she turns away to empty it, the venom falls, and he writhes in agony so violently that the whole earth shakes. We call those shakings earthquakes. And there he will stay, bound and burning, until the end of the world, when his chains finally snap, and he rises to lead the enemies of the gods in the last battle. Look at what this one death cost. The gods lost their kindest member. They lost their innocence. They lost a friend who became their greatest enemy. And they lost, forever, the comforting hope that their world might somehow be saved. From this moment on, there is no more golden age. There is only the waiting, and the gathering dark, and the certain knowledge of the end. Next, we turn to the monsters who will bring that end. Subscribe, and keep walking the saga with me.